What makes a good composition in photography? Photography is about more than just taking a photo. It's about taking the best photo you can every time. A rubbish composition will give you a rubbish photo, and a great composition will give you a great photo, or you got a chance of it anyway. The secret of a compelling image, it starts with the subject matter, how the other elements are arranged, what the light is doing, and how these three elements work together to create a captivating photo. A good composition creates a photo that is interesting and pleasing and guides the viewer's eye around the content of the photo. A good composition is one that a viewer will spend time looking at. A good composition holds the viewer's attention. A good composition is the starting point for a good or indeed great photo. So not much then. Blimey, there's a lot to get stuck into here, which is good. And yes, I did write all that little lot. Hi, and a very warm welcome to episode 201, no less, of the Photography Explained podcast. I'm your host, Rick, and in each episode, I will try to explain one photographic thing to you in plain English in less than 27 minutes-ish without the irrelevant details. Yes, really. I'm a professionally qualified photographer based in England with a lifetime of photographic experience, which I share with you in my splendid podcast. Yes, dear listener, I started with the answery bit. Well, after 200 episodes, I finally realised that was the way to go, so why not, eh? Why not? Right, in the last episode, I told you how I take photos, and that was the technical side of composition. And you might be thinking after that episode, but what is a good composition, Rick? Don't worry, so was I. So here is my take on what a good composition is. And no, this is not going to be about the rules of photography. There's far too many articles and blog posts on that. No, for completeness, I'm going to cover them in the next episode. Well, I'm going to tell you what they are, and I'm going to tell you the ones that I use, not all of them. No, in this episode, I'm going to give you some things you can think about before taking a photo. These things will hopefully make you think differently about your photography and help you to take better photos, all explained in a talky bit kind of way. And since writing that bit, I've added something to the main script, which is things that you can do. How utterly splendid. Right then, let's begin at the beginning. What is composition? Very simply, composition is what you include in a photo, and what you do not include in a photo, just as important. Composition is the subject matter and the other things in the composition and how they relate to each other, and of course what the light is doing. Yep, photography is drawing with light, dear listener, of course it is. So what are the fundamentals of composition? Well, these are my fundamentals of composition. Subject matter, other elements in the composition, and light. Now, let's not overthink this. That is composition to me. I know there's lots more I could throw in here, but I don't want to, and there's a very good reason why not, which I will tell you about. Don't worry. No, we take these three things and we use them to create the most interesting, most compelling photos that we can. And your composition is your composition, dear listener. It is your interpretation of what you are seeing, what you're looking at, what you're feeling and thinking, and what you want to capture and share with others at that moment in time. And that is the beauty of photography. It starts with what you see and feel, and at the time that you're taking that photo, no one else is seeing and feeling what you are seeing and feeling. Nobody else is taking that photo exactly the same way that you are. No one. Very important point. Right, subject matter. Well, subject matter's the star of the photo. You'd hope so, wouldn't you? That's what you're taking a photo of. So find an interesting subject to photograph is a good starting point. Of course it is. And somebody once said, I do believe it was Scott Kelby, if you want to take an interesting photo, go somewhere interesting. Wise words, Scott, of course. Now, the subject matter, it might be given to you if you're taking photos for somebody else, like a client, and I talked about this in the last episode, or it might be something of your choosing. But whatever the subject, it needs to be the star of the show and should be treated accordingly. How light makes or breaks a photo. Photography is drawing with light. I can't say that too often. And just in case you didn't know, that is what the word photography means. Photo is light, graphe is drawing, or writing, it depends on your interpretation of the translation. And we need to remember this. Photography is drawing with light, and great light can make a great photo. But rubbish light can make a rubbish photo. Yes, really. So we start with our primary light source, that big free one in the sky called the sun, which is a directional light which creates highlights and shadows, and how the elements align with each other and the sun will change the composition. Your job as the photographer, dear listener, is to make the most compelling photo you can. Your job is to make a photo that people want to look at. I said this earlier, an excellent composition, it guides the viewer's eye through the photo, and the viewer's eye should move through the photo in a natural way. And you can do this by arranging the elements of the composition and by clever use of light. In case you were wondering why I was saying this again under the light section. You can use shadows and lighter elements of a photo to draw the eye in and direct the viewer's eye. We're naturally drawn to the lightest parts of a photo, so we can use the shadows to accentuate the lighter part of the photo, which is often the subject matter. And you can use shadows to guide the viewer's eye as well. And this is where moving around helps, as in moving around before you take a photo, because the light changes when you change where you are in relation to where it's coming from and to all the other bits in a photo. It's one of those things you really need to try to appreciate it, and when you do it, you find a load of things in a composition. You got some nice directional light, aka the sun, and you move around, you can see how things change. It's amazing when this penny drops, it really is. And in doing this and using light cleverly, you can create depth and interest in a photo. Now, going back to that big old free light source, the sun. At midday, the light is overhead and harsh. And it's obviously much lower at sunrise and sunset. And at sunrise and sunset and the hours before and after, you get that amazing directional light. So the time of day you take a photo, it directly impacts what you end up with, which has an impact on your composition. So you need to be aware of the light's direction, intensity, colour, and how it lights up the composition, and how in moving around you can see how the light changes within that composition. Let's not forget, light's free, and we can use it to transform photos from dull to interesting. Be aware of where the sun is, and remember, it's always moving relative to where we are at any one time. And if it's cloudy, is that necessarily a bad thing? Well, on a cloudy day, the clouds actually diffuse the sun, and it can give you a lovely soft overhead light source, so it's not all bad. Cloud doesn't mean don't take photos, okay? Sunrise and sunset are great times to take photos, but we must extend that to sometime before and sometime after both sunrise or sunset, because there's a lot going on with the light. There's lots of changes, lots of things to capture and experience. It's great. So here's a recommendation from me. Get an app so you can find out the direction of the sun at any time in any place. I use one to plan my sunrise photography and indeed my photos of buildings. It's such a useful tool. Let's move on. Okay, so this is what I do. I'm aware of my compositions and also what the light's doing, not just when I'm taking photos, but when I'm walking around in my everyday life, just going about my usual stuff. I look at how things relate to each other. Yes, I really do. And I also watch what the light's doing. So this is what you need to do. You need to become a student of light, and you need to learn to think about light more. Learn to love light, because as a photographer, light is your friend, and it's a free tool that you can use to help you to take the best photos you possibly can. And you can enhance the light that you capture subtly in post-processing. Now, there was a very specific thing I was going to talk about then, but guess what? It's going to be another episode. How utterly splendid. Right then, so the other elements in the composition. This is another biggie for me. Obviously, it's one of the three things I'm talking about here. This is how the elements in a composition relate to each other. And most of the time, you've got control of this by simply moving around. Work out what the important elements of your photo are and look at how they relate to each other. Move around and see how the relationship of the different things changes, and also when you move around, what the light is doing within these changes. Moving and looking is the special compositional trick I want you to work on. Walking around and looking and thinking, and that's before you take a photo, that is, not after. So when we're trying to get a composition, what we're trying to achieve is a natural balance where the main subject is clear, but it doesn't overpower the other elements unless you specifically want it to. If you're after a generally pleasing photo, it's certainly something to think about. Do you want the main subject matter to be dominant or prominent? What you don't want to do is for the main subject to be lost amongst all the other elements. It's one for you to think about, dear listener. And more on this in the next episode when I pick up the rules of photography. And this has reminded me, at the time of writing, not now talking, I'm not that clever. If you're taking a landscape photo, don't put the horizon in the middle. Do this and you're in effect cutting the photo in half. No, put the horizon about 1/3 or 2/3 up the composition. This will of course vary depending on which is more interesting, the foreground or the background. Now, if you've got a fantastic sky, you want more of that in. But if you've got a fantastic foreground, you want more of that in. But about 1/3 up or about 1/3 down is where you put your horizon to get better compositions, and it helps you think about it too. Right, how can depth help make a great composition? Well, you don't want a photo to look flat or one-dimensional. When you create depth, the viewer's eye is drawn into the depths of the photo, making it more appealing and making the viewer study the image for longer. And it reduces the chance of somebody just swiping by and not looking at your photo in our nanosecond attention span, social media driven world. My, that sounded a tad cynical, didn't it? Yep, depth can make a photo feel more real. And how do we create depth in a photo? Well, this is all about arranging the elements in the composition, such as where the main subject is, what's in the foreground, what's in the middle ground, what's in the background, and how they relate to each other. And again, walking around works so well in looking at how these things change. As you move around, you can see how the various elements and their relationships change, and how the light's changing. And yes, you can use light to create depth. And you can also use a large aperture to blur out a background, reducing the depth of a composition, making the subject matter pop. So many things that you can do. Okay, one more compositional thing I want to say. Clutter in photos is not good. I do not like it. I like simplified, almost minimalist compositions. Cluttered scenes can be overwhelming and distracting, so try to simplify your composition by removing unnecessary elements. Okay then, here are some things that you can do. And I think this might be a new section, which is absolutely marvellous. Analyse your photos. Really look at your photos, look at your compositions critically and honestly. Look at what works and what doesn't work. This self-critique process, it will help you improve your compositional skills over time. Walk, look and think before you take a photo. Yes, really. Take fewer photos. I've talked about that before, haven't I? Get rid of the rubbish photos. Talked about that as well. And before taking a photo, ask yourself if what you're photographing is interesting. And when you got your final masterpiece, will other people find it interesting? And be honest with yourself now. With this and all the other questions, you've got to be honest with yourself. You've got to be a harsh critic, because that's what the world's like, unfortunately. Now, there's lots more to composition, of course there is, but I'm going to stop there. And the reason is this: I want to concentrate on the three biggest for me, which are these: subject matter, what you're taking a photo of, the other things in the composition, and light. Yep, said it many times. There's so much more to this, and that can be part of the problem. So if we have just these 3 things in mind when we take a photo, there is a chance that we will take better photos. And that is what I'm all about, us all taking better photos. Right, what do? Well, I've given my thoughts on composition. I've told you that I walk around, look and think. Whenever I go out taking photos, I look for one photo I can put in a portfolio. That means I have to get a better photo than the best 12 photos that I already have. It's a great challenge and it's a great way of focusing your attention on what you're looking at. And I also share my thoughts with you, don't I, dear listener, in the hope that the things that I tell you will help you to take better photos. And that is what I do. Some thoughts from the last episode. I want to say again that thinking before you take a photo can significantly improve the photos that you create. And what the photos will be used for will dictate how you approach taking the photos. But no matter what you're taking photos of or for, you must start with getting the best composition. Right, next episode, the rules of composition that I use, nice and simple. I'm also going to give you my take on the rules of composition, what they are, what they mean, what it's all about, and then I'm going to get into some really specific composition stuff. A quick plug for me and what I do. Well, why not? If I can't plug myself on my podcast, where can I? You found this podcast, so why not check out the podcast website, photographyexplainedpodcast.com. I also have another photography website, rickmcavoyphotography.com, where I write blog posts about my photographs of buildings and other good stuff. On my courses page, you'll find my course, How to Become a Real Estate Photographer. And you can also find me on YouTube talking about my podcast and my blog. Just type my name in and you will soon find me. Right, would you like a weekly email from me? If you would, and why wouldn't you? Just fill in the box on any of my websites and every Friday you will read what I'm thinking about, photography related. And that's enough of the self-promotion. Ask me a question. If you have a question you would like me to answer, or you just want to say hi, email me at sales@rickmcavoyphotography.co.uk. Visit the podcast website, or you can even text me from the podcast feed. How utterly splendid. But it's always lovely to hear from you, dear listeners, whatever you've got to say. Okay, this episode was brought to you by a cheese and pickle sandwich and a bag of salt and vinegar crisps. Yes, it really was, which I consumed before settling in my homemade, acoustically cushioned recording emporium. I've been Rick McEvoy. Thanks again very much for listening to my small but perfectly formed podcast, it says here, and for giving me 27 minutes-ish of your valuable time. Now, I reckon this episode will be about 20 minutes long after I've edited out the mistakes and other bad stuff. Thanks for listening. Take care. Stay safe. Cheers from me, Rick.